Okay, so good afternoon, class, and welcome to your financial accounting and reporting class. No? So today we'll discuss about retained earnings. So retained earnings, uh, on how are you going to calculate for it? So beginning retained earnings plus or minus corrections of errors from prior year. No, take note of this. Any corrections of prior year's books have to be made in the retained earnings. Plus or minus changes in accounting policy. Then you'll get your adjusted retained earnings beginning balance. Plus any net income or less losses, less dividends declared to come up to your total retained earnings. And then less any appropriated retained earnings, either legal, contractual, or voluntary. So when we say appropriated retained earnings, these are the earnings that we set aside for specific purpose. So during the general meeting, the BOD, and also upon the approval of the board, can set aside funds. So either they use it for expansion or to pay off dividends. No? So we have to deduct that from the total retained earnings to come up with the unappropriated retained earnings. When we say unappropriated retained earnings, these are the residual balance that's available to pay off dividends. So on treasury shares, it is required by the revised corporation law. So dividends. So upon declaration date, our entry Okay, so going back to dividends. Upon declaration date, the journal entries are as follows. Debit retained earnings and credit dividends payable. Pansinin class, debiting the retained earnings means reducing the total retained earnings, and then credit dividends payable. In this case, dividends payable is a current liability. So let's talk about, well, payable is the classification of dividends payable in this case is dependent upon the type of the dividends. No? We'll go through this a little bit later. So what are the different types of dividends? Number one, we have cash dividends. So per share in the case of ordinary shares, or percentage of par for preference shares. No? So ordinary shares or common stock, preference share, or preferred shares. No? Then we have property dividends. Number three, cash or property alternative. Shareholders are given the option to either receive cash or property. Now, for stock dividends, it's important to distinguish between small and large stocks. No? For small stock, or less than 20% of the outstanding shares, it is settled in the form of additional shares. No? So debit retained earnings at the fair value of shares at declaration date. If it's large stock, or 20% or more, we debit retained earnings at par value. No? So we have to make sure of that. We have to uh, determine. Okay, so we have to determine, as I'll just turn off my camera. Unless you want to see me coughing. So apologies. Uh, so large stock, 20% or more, no? Again, we have to make sure that we calculate the percentage of the dividends in terms of the outstanding shares, because it will make a lot of difference. No? Again, for small stocks, we debit retained earnings at fair value of shares at declaration date. Okay, sige. So let's do some discussion problems. No? So let's have discussion problem 1 to illustrate to you those that we have discussed previously. So the question is, what amount should be reported as retained earnings on December 31, 2021? Let me read the problem. On January 1, 2021, an entity reported the following shareholders' equity. So share capital, 100,000 shares authorized, 550,000 shares outstanding, 100 par for 5 million. Then we have share premium of 4 million, retained earnings of 5 million. O, tignan ang date class. This is January 1, 2021. So meaning these are the beginning balances. The board of directors declared a 10% share dividend on July 1, 2021 when the market value of the share was 150. The share dividend was issued on October 1, 2021 when the market value of the share was 200. The entity sustained a net loss of 2 million for 2021. So what amount should be reported as retained earnings? And let's have problem 1. Okay. Pag-usapan muna natin, is this a small stock or big stock? So in this case, it's a small stock. No? Kasi given naman dyan, sabi 10% share dividend. Okay, so if it's 10% share dividend, sabi natin, we have to recognize the reduction to retained earnings at market value. Okay? So, pansinin, tignan mo yung calculation natin, no? 50,000, that's the shares outstanding, multiplied by 10%, multiplied by 150. So we recognize the retained earnings on the day of the declaration. Okay? Credit stock dividend payable. Pansinin, sa stock dividend payable naman, it is at par value. So 50,000 shares outstanding, then 10% kasi 10% yung bibigyan natin ng share dividend. Multiplied by the par value. And then any difference would form part of your share premium. So come October 1, 2021, sabi dyan, the entity, October 1, ito na yung issuance, no? So stock dividend payable, that's 500,000. Share capital will also be at par, no? So that's 500,000. While the market value as of the issuance date or payment date is given, it's irrelevant, no, in our calculation. Ulitin natin yung class na. So the entries to recognize uh, the dividend should be prepared at declaration date. And then there's another entry for the net loss. No? So obviously for net loss, we just have to close it to our income and expense summary. So that's retained earnings, 2 million, and then credit income and expense summary, 2 million. Now we're ready to calculate our retained earnings. No? So our beginning retained earnings is 5 million. Net loss is 2 million, that's given. And then pansinin, 750,000, that's at the point of declaration. Sakit lang kasi.
22 lang.
Tayo. Okay. So, pansinin nyo na we can go straight ahead, straight to calculating the retained earnings, no? Pero ang ginawa natin, we provided some journal entries so you can easily understand and comprehend kung paano nangyari yung ganitong transactions, no? The net loss will always be a reduction to your retained earnings, and then obviously is also the dividends, no? Lagi lang tatandaan that the dividends need to be calculated at the time of declaration. Okay, sige. So that's problem number 1. So let's do another problem. What amount should be reported as an appropriated balance of retained earnings? No? So remember the template that I have introduced earlier. Basically, this problem is asking you to apply that to to calculate the unappropriated balance of retained earnings. Okay, let me read the problem. An entity reported the following shareholders' equity on January 1, 2021. Ako, class, one tip, no? Whenever you analyze problems like this, i-underline nyo na agad yung mga dates kasi it's very critical that we understand the timing, no? Kasi, like for example, this one, if you underline January 1, 2021, then the question also has December 31, 2021. You can easily identify that these succeeding balances are your beginning balances. Sometimes kasi the problem is very tricky. Ang binibigay niyo dito are already the ending balances. So share capital, 50 par, 110,000 shares. That's 5,500,000. Share premium of 2 million. Retained earnings of 5 million. Treasury shares at cost, 10,000 shares for 1,500,000. On June 30, 2021, the entity declared and issued a 20% share dividend when the market value per share was 150. On December 31, 2021, the entity paid a cash dividend of 20 per share. The net income for 2021 was 6 million. So what amount should be reported as an appropriated balance of retained earnings? So let's have problem number 2. O sige. This time, isa-isa natin class. We have total shares, 110,000. But then there's treasury shares. No? So we have to reduce the total balance by that. No? So total shares natin is, sige ta, para mas madaling tingnan. Okay, so that's 100,000. Now, the entity declared and issued 20% share dividends. O, di ba? Usapan natin. Pag 20%, it is considered as large stock. So, therefore, we have to recognize it at par. Kung nag-issue ka ng share dividend, therefore, your total shares will also increase. Eh, sabi dyan, 20%. So, therefore, 100,000 multiplied by 20%. So, that's 20,000. Another way to calculate that is simply dividing this 1 million by the 50 par. No? Okay. So, total outstanding shares would be 120,000. Now, let's look at this transaction. Sabi natin, on June 30, nag-declare daw ng nag-declare daw ng 20% share dividend. So, the entry would be 100,000 multiplied by 20%. Establish na natin kanina yan. Multiply by the par value. So, that's 1 million. And credit share capital for 1 million because this is already at par. Okay. Next, on December 31, 2021, the entity paid a cash dividend of 20 per share. So, paano yan, class? Saan ang basis? No? The basis will be the outstanding shares. No? So, remember, nung June 30, nag-declare ka ng 20% stock dividend. So, that increased your total outstanding shares. No? So, in this case, when the entity declared and paid a cash dividend of 20, the basis would be the total outstanding shares. No? And it's important to calculate this, class, ha? Whenever you're dealing with problems like this, kailangan una natin ina-establish how much would be the total outstanding shares. No? So in this case, 120,000 multiplied by 20. So debit retained earnings for 2,400,000 and then credit 2,400,000. Then obviously, for the net income, no? So we have to close it. But that's 6 million, no? But in this case, this is a net income, no? So mali to. Dapat to credit. Yan, ganyan dapat siya. 6 million. Okay. Yan. Okay. So we have retained earnings of 5 million beginning. Add the net income. Less dividends. Ano yung mga dividends natin? We have the stock dividends of 1 million. Cash dividends of 2,400,000. So we have a retained earnings ending of 7,600,000. But then the treasury shares of 1,500,000 is appropriated, no? So pansinin mo dun sa template earlier, it's treasury shares are part of the legal appropriation, no? And therefore we have to reduce the total retained earnings with that amount to come up with the unappropriated retained earnings. Okay, so that's problem number 2. Siguro, for this problem, what we need to reiterate is the need to calculate for the total outstanding shares. No? So please be careful with that. Ensure that the dates, no? Say for example, kasi in this case, the declaration was made on June 30, 2020. What if the cash dividend was made prior to June 30? Sabi mo lang May 30. So how much would be your total outstanding shares? No? So it will be 100,000 only. Wala pa kasi ito, no? Kaya, like I said, it's important and critical to identify the dates because it will make a lot of difference in the calculation. Okay? Sige, let's proceed with the property dividends naman. Hindi ko ito ma-mute. Oh, ayaw siya ma-mute. Yeah. Special. Anyway, sige. Property dividends. No? So valuation of dividends payable. Declaration, year-end, and settlement. We have to the amount needs to be the fair value of assets to be distributed. The measurement of the asset itself, IFRS 5, or the non-current assets held for sale, also applicable to assets to be distributed to owners, or we call it property dividends. Lower of carrying amount or fair value less cost to dispose. If fair value less cost to dispose is less than the carrying amount, the difference is impairment loss. Further decline in fair value less cost to dispose is equivalent to considered as further impairment loss. So, total class na ulitin lang natin, pero at least we have problems to illustrate, no, this concept. No? Pero reiterate lang natin that in order for us to put a value on those properties that we have declared for property dividends, the fair value of the assets to be distributed, no, we have to consider. Now, going back to the lower of carrying amount, no? Carrying amount, this is your book balance. Or fair value less cost to dispose. If fair value less cost to dispose, pansinin na, is less than the carrying amount, so therefore, there is an impairment loss, no? For example, ito na lang, meron kang kotse, may kotse si entity, valued at 200,000. But then, the fair value less cost to dispose. No? Fair value of that car is 150,000. Ulitin natin na the book value of the car is 200,000. Fair value less cost to dispose is 150,000. So, ibig sabihin, the fair value of that car is less than the book value. So, therefore, we have to recognize an impairment loss. Bakit? Well, in reality, you are recording the car in the books higher than the fair value. Eh, di ba remember, fair value, this is the price where there is a willing buyer to buy or willing seller to sell. No? So meaning this is the going value for that particular car. So the amount of the asset, the valuation of the asset is higher or is higher than the fair value. Okay, so sabi ko dyan, further decline in fair value less costs is disposed, then we recognize further impairment loss. Okay, so let's have problem 3. So in problem 3, we have 3 questions. No? What amount should be reported as retained earnings on December 31, 2020? Okay. On December 31, 2021, the inventory should be reported at what amount? And number 3, what amount should be recognized as gain distribution of property dividend in 2022? Let me read the problem. On January 1, oops. On January 1, 2021, an entity showed the following shareholders' equity. Share capital 50 par, 30,000 shares outstanding for 1,500,000. We have share premium 3 million. Retained earnings of 5 million. On July 1, 2021, the entity declared the property dividend of inventory payable on March 1, 2022. The inventory had 1,200,000 carrying amount and fair value less cost to distribute of 1,500,000. On July 1, 2021, 1,800,000 on December 31, 2021, and 2 million on March 1, 2022. The net income for 2021 was 6 million. On December 31, 2021, the entity paid cash dividends of 2,500,000. Sige, let's have problem number 3. Okay, sige, isa-isahin muna natin dito, no? Yung mga transactions. Una, on July 1, 2021, this is the date of declaration. Sabi natin, the inventory had a carrying value of 1,200,000 and a fair value less cost to distribute of 1,500,000. And remember, di ba, sabi natin doon, we recognize the property at fair value. No? So in this case, debit retained earnings for 1,500,000. Okay. Come December 31, 2021, pansinin, end of year, no? Come December 31, 2021, ang sabi dyan, the fair value less cost to distribute would be 1,800,000 on December 31, 2021. So therefore, we have to recognize the difference, no? So the increase. So from 1,500,000, nag-increase siya to 1,800,000. So therefore, we have to increase it by 300,000. So debit retained earnings, 300,000. Credit property dividends payable for 300,000. Okay. Now, come March 1, 2022, pansinin, the fair value less cost to distribute became 2 million. Okay. So in this case, we still have to record the difference. No? So that's retained earnings from 1,800,000 ngayon 2 million na. So that's additional 200,000. So debit 200,000 and then credit 200,000 property dividends payable. Next, property on the date of settlement. No? Kailan yung date of settlement? March 1. Date of settlement, March 1, 2022. So ngayon, we have to uh, record the entry. No? So debit property dividends payable, that's 2 million. Paano na-compute yung 2 million? Well, this is the fair value no? At March 1, 2022. No? So that's 2 million. How much is the inventory again? The book value of the inventory is 1,200,000. So therefore, in this case, we have to recognize a gain. No? So that's a difference between the property dividend payable and the carrying amount to be distributed per IFRIC 17 or IFRIC 17 should be recognized as gain or loss. So in this case, we have to recognize 800,000 gain. Okay, so let's now compute for the retained earnings. So retained earnings beginning, we have 5 million. Add net income. Net income is also given, that's 6 million. And then less any property dividends. So property dividends, ito class, tingnan mo ha. Ang tinatanong sa atin dito is how much, what amount should be reported as retained earnings on December 31, 2022. Ayan, kaya important na nag-highlight ka ng dates kasi ang bilis magkamali na kunin mo yung 2 million as property dividends. But remember class, the property dividend as at December 31, 2021 is only 1,800,000. It will be different kung 2022 yung pinag-uusapan natin. Kasi in 2022, it will be 2 million. Okay? So yun, be careful with that. Ha? And then cash dividends of 2,500,000. Again, it happened in December 31, 2021. So the total is 6,700,000. So that's letter B, 6,700,000. Number 2, on December 31, 2021, the inventory should be reported at what amount? Inventory, so that's 1,200,000. What amount should be recognized as gain in the distribution of property dividends in 2022? So that's 800,000. Pansinin class dito sa December 31, 2021, no? We record the inventory at carrying value. So that's still 1,200,000. And what if the question was for March 1, 2022? So it should be 0 kasi nga ibinigay na natin as dividend. Okay? Oh, class, let's pause for a 5-minute break, quick break, no? Before we proceed with the rest of the topics. Stretching muna or drink some water, tapos come back. Okay? Okay. So we'll continue with the alternative dividends. No? When we say alternative dividends, shareholders are given the option to either receive cash or property. So in this case, we use probability in recognition on the date of declaration. So paano yan? Let's have problem number 4. So problem number 4 has 2 requirements. Number 1, what amount should be recognized as dividend payable on December 31, 2021? And then number 2, what amount should be recognized as gain on distribution property dividend in 2022 if the ordinary shareholders elected to receive non-cash asset? So let me read the problem. On January 1, 2021, an entity had ordinary and preference shares outstanding. The incorporators own 10 ordinary shares but no preference shares. On December 31, 2021, the entity declared dividends on the ordinary shares payable on December 31, 2022. Ayan, I will highlight that date. No? It's important. The entity decided to give the ordinary shareholders a choice between receiving a cash dividend of 500,000 per share or in the form of non-cash asset. The non-cash asset is a standard model from the entity's car fleet. Each car has a fair value of 600,000 and carrying amount of 450,000 on December 31, 2021. The fair value of the car is 700,000 on December 31, 2022, which is the date of settlement. The entity estimated that 80% of their ordinary shareholders will take the option of the cash dividend and 20% will elect for the non-cash asset. No? So that's the probability. So let's have problem number 4. Buuin ko to ha para hindi nakakalito. Non-cash asset or simply car. No? So total cash, sabi natin, 500,000 per share. Ayan, 500,000 per share. Um, how many shares does the incorporators own? Sabi dyan, 10. No? Incorporators own 10 ordinary shares. So that's 500,000. Okay. So 500,000 multiplied by 10 multiplied by 80%. Ano yung 80%? Again, class, this is the probability. Sabi ng problem, there's an 80% chance that the ordinary shareholders, will take the cash dividend and the other 20% will elect for the non-cash asset. Ibig sabihin, pipiliin nila yung kotse. No? So that's 500,000 multiplied by 10, multiplied by 80%. So that's 4 million. For the non-cash asset, pansinin, it should be on fair value, di ba? So fair value during the declaration date is 600,000 multiplied by 10. So that's 20, multiplied by 10, multiplied by 20%. So that's 1,200,000. Get the sum, that's 5,200,000. No? So lagyan natin ngayon ng entries. As of the declaration date, debit retained earnings, 5,200,000. Credit dividends payable, 5,200,000. Again, class, take note that if there is an option given to the shareholders to receive cash or property dividends, we have to use probability. So in this case, the probability is 80 and 20. So 80 cash, 20 property. That's how we calculated the 5,200,000 here. Next, this is the date of settlement. No? The fair value of the car is 700,000. So in this case, 700,000 multiplied by 10, so we have 7 million. We have to compare this with the initial calculation. No? So that's 5,200,000 less 7 million. So the difference we have to recognize. No? So that's debit retained earnings, 1,800,000. Credit dividends payable, 1,800,000. Pansinin class, this is the initial recognition. Now, this 7 million, this is based on fair value. Eh, sabi natin, di ba class, we have to adjust every time the fair value changes. No? So in this case, as of December 31, 2022, from 600,000, naging 700,000 yung fair value. No? So therefore, we have to recognize the increase. Okay. So, come settlement date, ito na. Property dividends, 7 million. And then non-cash assets, that's 4,500,000. Pansinin, this is the book value. So that's 450,000 multiplied by 10. Any difference again will be booked as gain. No? Okay, so let's now compute for the retained earnings. No? So, pero pansinin muna natin, what amount should be recognized as dividend payable on December 31, 2021? So we look at our entries, December 31, 2021, it should be 5,200,000. What amount should be recognized as gain on distribution property dividend in 2022 if the shareholders elected to receive the non-cash asset? O ito class, this entry will only be required if the uh, shareholders elected to receive the car, no, or the property. So the answer is 2,500,000. But just the same, we have provided here the calculation for the retained earnings, no, in case you want to look into this. No? But this is as of 2022. Okay? Okay, let's have problem number 5. Problem number 5, what amount should be reported as retained earnings on December 31, 2021? An entity had retained earnings of 3,500,000 at the beginning of 2021. Throughout 2021, the entity had 40,000 ordinary shares of 100 pesos par value that are issued and outstanding. O yan. During 2021, the entity reported net income of 5,500,000, purchased 5,000 treasury shares for 600,000, and declared dividends, cash dividends of 2 million. Reissued all treasury shares at a gain of 200,000 and declared and issued a 10% ordinary share bonus issue when the market value was 150 per share. Dami nangyari, no? But let's break it down. Let's have problem number 5. Ang tinatanong sa atin, what amount should be reported as retained earnings? No? So, unahin natin how much would be our beginning balance. Beginning balance natin, 3,500,000. Add net income. How much is the net income? 5,500,000. Now, let's look at the stock dividends. Sa stock dividends natin, pansinin, paano muna natin na-establish na 5 lang siya, na 5 na small stock kasi nga 10% lang siya, no? So, ang outstanding shares natin is 40,000. Pansinin ha, kaya ito naging 40,000 ulit, meron kang treasury shares, 5,000, pero na-reissue na siya agad eh. All of it, no? So, that's 40,000 less 5,000 and then na-reissue, so balik mo lang ulit, no? So, that's 40,000. So, from there, 40,000 multiplied by 10%, sa ano yung basis natin ng 150? Sabi natin, that's the market value. Kasi nga, small stock lang siya. Okay. Next, cash dividend. No? So, that's given. That's 2 million pesos. Let's just get the sum. So, our total retained earnings would be 6,400,000. Ulitin ko lang, class, ha? This is very critical in terms of the valuation for your stock dividends. You have to determine whether it's small stock or big stock. Small stock, 10%. Less than 20%, di ba? Sabi natin, we calculate it based on the fair value. Pero pag sinabi natin, pag naman ng stock is 20% or more, then we use the par value. Ayan, I hope I've reiterated that enough. No? Okay. Next, what amount should be reported as appropriated retained earnings? On January 1, an entity reported 1,750,000 of appropriated retained earnings for the construction of new office building, which was completed on December 31, 2021 at a total cost of 1,500,000. On December 31, 2021, the entity appropriated 1,200,000 of retained earnings for the construction of new plant. Also, 2 million of cash was restricted for the retirement of bonds due in 2022. On December 31, 2021, dividends of on 50,000 cumulative preference shares, 10%, 100 par value have not been declared for 3 years. So let's have problem number 6. Okay, ang tinatanong sa atin dito, is how much is the si ma'am, how much is the appropriated, no? O pansinin na, balikan natin yung template kanina, appropriated to be legal and involuntary, no? So sabi natin appropriated is our um, appropriated retained earnings are those money or earnings that we set aside for specific purpose, no? So in this case, 1,750,000 appropriated siya. But then, the purpose was already accomplished. Ang tinatawag sa atin is December 31. So therefore, this is no longer considered as appropriated. Construction of new plant for 1,200,000 as that was appropriated on December 31. And then 2 million cash restricted. Cash was restricted. But this is not retained earnings, no? Remember, pansinin, 2,000 of cash was restricted for retirement of bonds, no? But that is not considered part of the retained earnings. And then dividend in arrears, no requirement to appropriate. So therefore, the answer is 1,200,000. No? So yung ganun ang pag-analyze class, no? In this case, it's just the 1,200,000 that should form part of your appropriated retained earnings. Okay. Okay, so that's it. No? So let me just stop sharing.